Well, you just got me today, and I had supply chain. My peer, Arthur Leach, unfortunately got stuck in that snowstorm, and he's the head of manufacturing. So at Cardinal Health, I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Supply Chain. We define supply chain as everything that moves. We define manufacturing as everything that happens within those four walls. And so we work very closely together. He has the operation inside the four walls, and I have kind of everything that moves around it. And so we work very closely together. And I have both a very traditional role where you have corporate planning, corporate logistics, corporate procurement of those logistics, but then I also have a very operational role, and most of my distribution team is here today as well. So managing those 52 distribution centers in North America and the 4 replenishment centers globally, and that's what my team does. Really happy to be here. We're going to talk about our journey on our integrated business planning over the last really 4 or 5 years, and how we've driven that strategy into our scenario planning, and ultimately how that impacts manufacturing, which has been quite the journey for us as we kind of reach back over the last 4 or 5 years, the investments, and then really how we handed it off from a supply chain oriented S&OP&E process over to the business, which is ultimately what you want to do. You want your product teams, your finance teams to be able to manage through S&OP&E versus always being pushed. Okay? So we took a very disconnected effort and we made it into a unified strategy. And that really started, if you read about our segment, Cardinal Health has 2 major segments. We have the pharmaceutical segment, which is really distribution. And we have the medical segment, which has a very large medical supplies, med device manufacturing portion to that. And I'm speaking about the manufacturing side over on the supplies side. We were very, very fragmented. Very reactive. If you go back into the pandemic, you can read about it. We publicly released statements that the medical segment needed an improvement plan. And you don't do that if you are operating effectively. Well, one of the things we didn't have was an organized, orchestrated way of balancing demand and supply. So we went way back into just basics of S&OP. We couldn't talk about IBP back then. We really needed to start somewhere. We hired a consultant to come in, and sure enough, we were at a very low maturity. No surprises, but we needed to start somewhere to understand what we could do. There was limited cross-functional team alignment. They really weren't speaking at all. We were relying on 5 different advanced planning systems. I guess they're not really advanced if they're not talking to each other. And we have about, and still have about 30 or so manufacturing ERPs across our platform. So we are talking to a bunch of different systems today. We were reactive completely. We were reacting to various changes in demand, lead time variation. The coefficient of variations just were not picking up enough real-time information for us to use it to be more proactive in our work. And there was a ton of surprises. Our business just was not aligned. Fast forward to after we implemented S&OP&E, and then ultimately now we're at an IBP state. We are able to get into a full monthly cycle. We'll walk through how we've interpreted and how we leverage that cycle. We have shared accountability. So what's really fantastic is that as we handed the S&OP&E process ultimately over to what we define as the business, which is our commercial team and finance organization, to lead that, we're able to get full alignment. There are supply chain metrics in our commercial team's MBOs now. And so that kind of shift in mindset really brought the team and organization together in a way that I had not seen in the 15 years that I had been with the company. We have a unified view of demand and supply. We meet regularly in a regular cadence to make these long-term decisions in the IBP horizon, so going out 1, 2, 3 years. And we meet regularly on current S&OE type activities, so what's happening next week and the next month, to make sure that everything that we said we're going to execute is going to happen the way we think it will, and we can react quickly to any changes in our inputs. We have proactive decision making, so we leverage advanced scenario planning. We use a tool called Kinaxis. There's others out there that work just as well, but we leverage it because of the speed of the ability to run these scenarios. So before, when something happened and we needed to make decisions, we would run a scenario, planning would take that, corporate planning would take that. It would take them a week to get with manufacturing, procurement to see if it was possible. Well, we closed our full loop of scenario planning in order to enable this. And in doing so, we're able to react within hours. And so we can receive a request from our teams to say, we need to model these 3 different scenarios. you can get that back within a day. You don't need the system to run overnight. You don't need to work with manufacturing. All the information is closed loop, and it's already in there. And by closed loop, I mean we understand all of the work orders, the capacity within our manufacturing sites. We understand the capacity of our contract manufacturers, and we constantly feed that into our planning system so that we can react. So we scaled across our organization within the medical segment, kind of combining a bunch of acquisitions that we had seen over the past 10 years into one organization, and we started to centralize a lot of the activity. So we determined that in order for us to leverage our process, the demand and supply planning, and then ultimately our financial planning and how we would land on these various scenarios, we needed to adapt, and we needed to transform from that disaggregated approach to be able to plan into a fully integrated approach with alignment. And so these various elements to being able to do so, leveraging advanced analytics, introducing the advanced scenario planning that I talked about, fostering the collaborative culture, and then embedding continuous improvement into it, is the way that we were able to move from this disaggregated, misaligned approach between our cross-functional team, and we were able to start working and aligning and harmonizing what we were trying to achieve. Our MBOs were not so siloed anymore in that the supply chain teams and distribution team didn't just focus on metrics that were happening within their four walls, or manufacturing was not only focused on hitting their absorption rates. They started to think about our organization and our product portfolio as a strategic advantage to our overall business. And in doing so, we went from this chart, this should look familiar if you're familiar with Gartner and how they advise on these things, from reacting and anticipating all the way into integrating and collaborating. Ultimately, we leveraged Kinaxis Maestro for full orchestration. And so in order to do that, again, we've closed the supply chain loop, and we're able to react and know sooner if there's going to be an issue. So this is our process. We have to fit it into a 5-week process. We tried to squish it into 1 month. It doesn't work that way. But we do a full S&OP&E process that ultimately ends up in a full integrated reconciliation, which we're defining as our IBP process. So on the first week, we start down the path of a traditional alignment within our portfolio strategy, ensuring that any of our lifecycle management elements that would be applied to our demand plan are accounted for. We have marketing, R&D, supply chain, and our finance team all involved in this orchestration during the first week of the month. R&D is very important because there are a lot of projects that are running in parallel to make sure that we are accounting for maybe there's line time that needs to happen for validations that would need to be considered. All of these inputs need to be orchestrated. But we do get an updated product roadmap with volume assumptions and a financial impact once a month. We either are going through line by line if there is a concerted effort or a project to be able to expand line capacity or manufacturing site, or it's a check the block. Is the plan that we aligned on the previous month going to work for us as we move forward? It takes a little bit of discipline to get into this. And in the beginning, it was hard to get everybody to kind of come together on a regular cadence. Some found value in it, some saw the value, some were kind of with their hair on fire trying to figure out, why do I have to have this meeting? But we were very consistent in ensuring that we weren't creating duplicative meetings. And so the heads of each of these departments, which is a little simpler for us because we really have a head of manufacturing, a head of marketing, and a head of supply chain, and a head of finance, a CFO, we were able to ensure that we were reinforcing this first week process. It continues through the other 4 weeks as well, but the important piece is we got rid of all of the off-cycle meetings or those random, hey, quick touch bases. We started to force everything into this process right here. So even if it was something that R&D was running before and it was related to volume or market assumptions or lifecycle management, we forced it into IBP. We forced it in there. We would not have an off-cycle meeting that was not with all of the folks, and we were calling it very specifically IBP or S&OP so that we were ensuring that we were focusing on the process. On week 2, we start the demand review. So this is more traditional. This is your planning team meeting with your product marketers or your sales team and ensuring that there's a consensus based off of any market intelligence that they have and really anything that they're seeing. We have sales, marketing, demand planning, finance all involved and engaged so that when it comes to a little further along in the process, we can say, does everybody align? Is there a consensus? We may have to do some scenario planning early on, some minor scenario planning, so we can align on what that looks like as we publish the demand plan into the supply review, which happens during the 3rd week of the cycle. So in this cycle, we ensure that the capability meets demand with both our cost assumptions and our service targets. So we have service level targets for each of our categories. And then planning, manufacturing ops, procurement, finance, they all meet and ensure that, again, the supply plan is achievable. If we can't achieve the supply plan because we've run over our theoretical capacity or our CCP ran and we aren't able to achieve it, we will constrain that plan back down and we will send that back out to the sites so that we can ensure we understand that. Now we have a constrained supply plan or a full-on unconstrained supply plan after the 3rd week, which we can then push into our integrated reconciliation. It's really important to have that constrained plan, but not forget the unconstrained plan, as you know, so that we can continue to plan for additional capacity or investment, whatever we need to do there. After the integrated reconciliation happens, we have the demand team, supply, finance, the IBP coordinator, the S&OP coordinator, all align on one set of numbers that we will be presenting up to the 5th week, which is our executive IBP briefing and meeting, which is where any strategic decisions need to be made, or because we want to be consistent with our delivery of the messages, we will meet and say, the plan that you thought we were going to achieve for this year is still the plan that we were working on. There are no major changes. So we meet anyway, even if it's a 30-minute touch base versus an hour-long executive meeting. And that's where our CFO, CEO, COO all come together, all the functional heads, and say, we are still aligned or we need to make a decision based on some of the inputs that we saw earlier on. The 5th week overlaps the 1st week. 2 things can happen at once, and that's how we fit it into a month. That makes sense. So we have been driving these decisions a little bit easier based off of kind of these 5 dimensions. So starting with the scenario, how we simulate best, worst case, realistic cases. We typically bring 3 or 4 different options up to our executive team to kind of take a look at. And we align on the guidance in order to achieve whatever deliverable it may be. Sometimes we are focusing on service. Sometimes it's cost. Sometimes we need to expand capacity. Sometimes we need to honor the distribution network and determine if we can fit the product where we need to send it. We have 52 sites in North America, so we need to make sure it'll hit the right sites and be balanced correctly. All of those things are quantified and dollarized, and then we look at the impact. We align on the impact. We analyze and we look at different trade-offs. Sometimes we have to trade off costs in order to hit service targets, and that's fine. But as long as it's aligned and it makes it through our integrated reconciliation, we're all marching behind the same thing. And again, this process we've handed over to the business. So this is no longer a supply chain team trying to push for these results. The business is pushing and pulling this information up from operations, which is fantastic. Fantastic. And then we get the approval and we align on it. We've leveraged all of our scenario planning. We have advanced scenario planning leveraging Kinaxis. And we have this full-on integrated business planning process, which ensures that we are harmonized across the board, but that whatever manufacturing is going to make, plan is going to ensure we make it, and our distribution team is going to ensure that they can store it and get it out to the customers. So it significantly impacts how we look at our manufacturing. Obviously, there's benefits from how we optimize our production. It makes sure that we have looked at demand and supply, whether it's constrained or unconstrained, and that we can ensure that we're making what we need to. I was running the math this morning. I looked at our excess build report that we have, and I looked at it prior to starting this, and we've reduced our excess builds. We define it as anything you've made outside of your requirement that is over 2 months of the net requirement that you're supposed to build this month. They've reduced that by over 90%. Over the last 3 years. And so they really are very keen at making what they need to. Of course, our net requirement honors our lot sizing and everything else, and so we really are designed for efficiency in that space. But you can look at some of the other things here. Efficient resource use. How do we better allocate our labor? How do we look at the machinery that we need? Do we have max utilization? Should we run campaigns because we can better allocate and absorb the production differently? By doing so, we're able to really think about how we should be manufacturing, when we should be manufacturing. We can get ahead of holidays and downtime and any type of maintenance that needs to occur on our facilities as well. If Arthur was here, he also would say that he loves how it helps him plan labor. And so we have labor management systems that now are integrated into our overall net requirement. And he can look at our earned labor hours and let us know if he's going to have an issue at some point in the future, or if he's going to be able to cover the volume and the demand. With a stronger demand and supply match, he's able to make his overall operation understand what the market actually needs. He's able to reduce waste and ensure product availability, but manufacturing now has a seat at the table. They're able to walk through this demand and supply match, and manufacturing can say, hey, have you considered, in this IBP process, have you considered that this is going to impact manufacturing in this way, and can we come up with a plan to support that? One of the probably most efficient things that we've done has been able to do pull forward of demand for manufacturing in order to make sure that they're more efficient. Those requests come all the time. Before we had a fully integrated process, manufacturing is kind of operating on their own. They knew what they needed to do to absorb the cost of the operation, ensure that they're hitting their standard costs. However, they didn't have a way, or there was no mechanism within Cardinal Health to approve those types of pull forwards. So often they would take the financial hit, or they would run rogue and they would make the product anyway, and we'd have to figure out how to absorb that into our distribution network. You can imagine that had a lot of costs to our overall operation if you looked at our end-to-end cost to serve. And so we had the distribution team saying, hey, we were not planning for these additional loads that were coming through. We don't have dock time. We had to hire more labor. Maybe we had to use overtime in order to do that. It was just driving a ton of costs into our operation. But now, the manufacturing team, because they have a seat at this full-on 5-week process, they're able to come back and say, hey, this plan that you all aligned on and are trying to achieve, it's going to impact us in this way, and it's actually going to add cost. Can we talk about it? Can we run some scenarios that are mutually beneficial for operations in the manufacturing locations, for the distribution network, and for the customer? And that's resulted in times where we've pulled requirements ahead up to a year. We'll pull them out of the next fiscal year even, if it'll help ensure that we can manage our costs appropriately within manufacturing. So it's been a really significant driver of our efficiency for them. It lowers costs, so they've optimized production, there's waste reduction, improved resource use. We have limited line time. There's some products that are, we would love to expand faster. Obviously, we're highly regulated, so it takes time to get the lines validated as the demand kind of improves. But one of the best examples I can share of how this lowers costs and helps us improve our resource use, as needles and syringes started to become a hot topic because of the tariff from China and a lot of the movement there, we had and have 2 facilities in the United States still that manufactures needles and syringes. And rather than an outsourcing model or moving to China, we decided to leverage our resource use in the United States, available capacity. We were probably running a 1 or 2 shift operation. Now we run 3 shifts there to keep up. But we were able to quickly model that, leverage the IBP process, approve a plan, and even though we didn't have all of the demand right away, we were able to develop a storage plan that was able to ensure that we could leverage our US-made production to our advantage. So that bullet point and how we operated within IBP helped us move from a resilient supply chain where we had a backup that was nearshore or really onshore, from resilient to really anti-fragile, where there was a situation that was occurring globally, and we were able to leverage it to help reduce our cost of our production, keep our costs lower for our customers, and it's a good story for everybody. It really helped us work with the administration differently, and gave us the volume we needed to ensure that our 2 facilities were going to continue to operate in the United States, which was great to see. Of course, it gives the team a ton of agility, much greater than what we had before. They know, the manufacturing team knows, without a doubt, what the next 8 weeks of production looks like. Now, they'll respond to exception messages, just like everybody will. But we are in much more control on how we respond to those. So they know at each of the manufacturing sites whether or not to respond to it. They know that there is a weekly cadence of S&OE, so the execution side of this longer IBP process, that they can tap right into and say, I have a question. We're seeing this huge expedite request. Is it real? Do you want me to respond to it, or can we push it out? And because everybody has a seat at the table in that environment, we can actually talk about it, run a scenario very quickly, get back to manufacturing within a day so that they can work on either placing POs to be able to meet that requirement or push it off, and then we'll adjust the planning system out. But we can respond quicker to market changes. I'm going to quickly talk about our collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment cycle, which isn't part of the IBP cycle, but it does help us understand what our customers are trying to do. So at Cardinal, if you are a prime distribution account for us, we run a full 4-week process, which is similar to S&OP&E, called collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment. Not a new term, it's something that CPG uses a lot. But what we do is we understand by part and by site what our customers also are trying to achieve. We run it, we have planners that work with those particular accounts. We cover about 80% of our volume in that way. And we know if there are going to be changes in the market, or if they're going to be changing anything because a disease state changed, or some sort of seasonality changed, or the flu season is spiking, we can react to it right away. Because we have the collaborative planning team that's working with our customers every single month at the same cadence, it touches kind of a cycle. It touches the IBP process as well. And so any changes to their demand, or any projected changes, or the conversations that we're having with them, are also input directly into our overall process and plan. So no longer is it a surprise. I mean, there's occasional surprises, but no longer is there a surprise if there is a campaign at a hospital or surgical center. We know about them, we're able to input the demand, and it responds directly in through Kinaxis, sends the signal directly down into the manufacturing sites, and we're able to react much faster and avoid the disruptions. We also know if we are going to cause a disruption much faster. So if demand is outpacing supply for some reason, we have a line down, we can turn that off in the system, remodel it, and then redistribute our available inventory, put it on allocation or not, or see if one of our other manufacturing sites can make the same product and ramp it up. We have redundancy across many of our portfolios. It gives us better inventory control. So not just finished good inventory control, we have significantly reduced our finished good inventory and increased service level. When we started on the finished goods side about 4 years ago, our service level at Cardinal Health brand, was in the mid 70% raw. It was very, very poor. We're the manufacturer, so I'm not going to edit that out. We were not servicing our customers effectively. Today, we consistently provide service in the high 90% mark for Cardinal Health brand products at an aggregate, and we have lower inventory than we had about 3 or 4 years ago, which is just an incredible way to think about, we were making the wrong stuff, we were not orchestrating, we were not balancing appropriately, and we were just providing really, really poor service. So we changed that. But it also helps with inventory control on the raw material side, the procurement team down to the manufacturing sites. It gives better consistency to our raw material suppliers. We can actually give them a forecast that is relatively stable, which helps them as well. We try to target an 80 to 85% forecast accuracy, even at the raw material level, to provide some consistency. But it's been able to change the relationships and how we're able to work with that, and for sure has helped with obsolescence. Can't always avoid that, but for sure we've started to pull that further down as we've been maturing this overall operation. And then finally, strategic alignment. Manufacturing, which kind of was tucked way down into the organization, now has an elevated voice. They are able to support broader business goals and profitability. They help us expand our market share where we want to, and they come up with a lot of great ideas. Because they've got a seat at the table, our marketing teams visit the manufacturing sites. They are actually talking to them about what they could do. What can we offer as a manufacturing site to help support a portfolio expansion? What can we do? What do we used to do? I mean, we have, over, I think, gosh, we're entering in some cases the old Kendall products, the Kendall company products. We're talking over 150 years of production, especially when you think about our cotton products and our wound care products we make down in the Southeast. A lot of that stuff, comes from, years and years of experience. We have a lot of tenured staff in the manufacturing side, giving them that voice to say, hey, we used to make a traditional wound care dressing that looked like this. We don't make it anymore, but maybe we could do it again. Maybe there is a market still for that. They've got a voice at the table. It helps everyone kind of think about what that means. So this is it, and I want to leave some time. I've got about 10 minutes left, it looks like, for questions as well. But with this, it's empowered our leadership team to make not just the right decisions at the right time with a clear view of the business impact, but they're informed decisions. These are informed, aligned decisions. We're no longer working in these silos, these verticals that don't talk to each other. We were for sure. I mean, absolutely we were, but we're not anymore. So when we make these business decisions, you're like, well, we have an R&D person that sits on a business decision about procurement, and we have procurement teams working on planning, and we have all of these kind of executives coming together now in an aligned plan. And you know what else? Our teams see it. And so part of the culture shift is how we were all operating with each other at the very top of the organization. And as we push that down through and we say, yeah, this, maybe this is disadvantaging our distribution network, and my distribution team knows that that appears to be the case sometimes a lot. But when you look at the full business case, it was the right thing to do for manufacturing, or it's the right thing to do for a customer service, or we'll cover the cost of transportation a different way. It's much more aligned, allows us to execute much more efficiently and effectively. So connecting strategy execution through a single aligned view to hit whatever financial outcome we agree on enables us to be able to do this very quickly. Again, we use scenario planning very, very consistently. Every single day we're seeing different scenarios pop up. Some of them are held at different levels of our approval matrix. Not everything is a vice president or a senior vice president decision. We've given and empowered the lowest levels. I think with clarity and competency, you can push the decision making down, and that's something that we're able to do because we have a process. Our CEO and CFO have seen the results of operating in an IBP landscape, and they know that the decisions that we're making down the lower levels are thoroughly reviewed. They're well thought. They have financial review. They have marketing inputs. So they don't worry that we're making these decisions kind of in a silo anymore. So they're very comfortable with enabling the teams to make those decisions. There are some, because of the approval matrix, that need to route up. There's a millions of dollar mark that does ensure that those things are coming up to the top. But we do try to make decisions the best we can at the lowest levels. Kinaxis has been really very instrumental in changing this for us. It orchestrates our full IBP process at this point, and it delivers that real-time agility that we've been talking about. And then governance and culture matter. Culture really matters. We could not have done this if supply chain was leading S&OP&E, and that was it, and we never got into integrated reconciliation. We never got the CFO to understand the value of S&OP&E. That would never have happened. It really did take us being consistent, driving for those, participation in that weekly cadence of meetings, not scheduling meetings that people weren't involved in, trying to keep everybody together on the same page. It took a lot of discipline. It took years. I mean, it took probably, of the 4 years we've been on the journey, the first 1.5 to 2 years was simply getting people to comply with this process and some discomfort with discussing these topics openly at that level. Looking ahead, it's not a planning process. It's not simply a planning process for us. It's a strategic capability. It leverages our full scenario planning in Kinaxis, and it helps us move from reacting to really becoming more efficient with confident outcomes that are aligned for our overall organization. I think that's all I've got. So I think we left about 6 or 7 minutes for questions. There's some up here.
Thanks, Peter. Great talk on integrated business planning. Question, you got to it at the end a bit, but can you expand on the culture piece? I mean, the silos you mentioned, it sounds like they fought you for 2 years. So can you share more of what do we need to know as we implement IBP?
Yeah, for sure, I was the champion at first, right? I knew the value of it from a planning perspective. I think back then I was the vice president of planning. And so they're like, this is not working. These 2 consultants have said we need this thing called S&OP&E. Pete, can you figure it out? That's how it started. And I was like, sure, I'm gonna need support. So I worked with our HR team and came up with a bunch of what I viewed as change champions and got them all on board with it. I also was able to work with our CFO at the time and our CEO and say, I'm going to start to make some things very uncomfortable for how we're working today, but I'm going to need your support. And I can tell you holistically, if you look at this view, if I don't have that support or your emphasis that this is going to be our new priority, it's never going to work. So we sat in a room 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago probably now, and we were working on our MBOs for the next year for the segment. for the whole segment. And we entered a goal for us to achieve a S&OP maturity level of like 1.5, something very low, because we had been assessed at below a 1. And that went into everybody's MBOs. So that was the first step. Nobody really understood it or what we were going to get to. They had taken the survey, but they really didn't get it. But then slowly we were able to get other department heads on board with what we were trying to achieve. The CEO and CFO enforced that they were going to attend these meetings in this cadence. Back then it was a 4-week process. We weren't thinking about IBP at all. And then slowly, with patience and kind of a lot of me and others going, hey, Jerry, you need to come to this meeting because I need your team to see that you're there and I need you to participate. It was a lot of that, I'll be honest with you. But once we kind of bridged that gap of kind of understanding the importance of S&OP&E, about 2 years in, it took a long time, we started to just see more organic participation. And that's when we started to see the business starting to wanting to pull more information. So the marketing team started to see more value in it. Finance started to see more value in it. The consistency, how much more predictable we could be with at least the shared expectation of what we're trying to achieve. Once they started to see that and we started providing proof points, we started to get more participation. There was also a moment where I think we had a breakdown and everybody was frustrated and trying to figure out how to do something. It was still height of high supply chain disruption, so pressure was high. Where we brought in some perspective on emotional intelligence as it relates to S&OP&E journeys, and like this chart of we're way down here. There's a lot of friction. We aren't all standing behind the same effort. The CEO has said it's our effort, it's in our MBOs, but we aren't really acting that way. And we had to bring like leaders into a room and sit there and say, what is going on? Why is there so much friction? We did that, kind of talked about things openly. Honestly, there was some tears. I was kind of surprised, but there was. And we worked through it and we started to crack down on it. So is it easy? It was not by any means. But by year 2.5, 3, they saw the value, they started to participate more at regular cadence. And around year 3, just really in the last year or so, we handed the formal process over to our commercial organization, which runs it today. It's still orchestrated by my team on the supply chain side, but it is fully run by the business now. It was hard.
Just 2 quick questions. The first one, how long do you plan? What's your time frame? 18 months, 24? And the second one is, how this process, IBP, is synchronizing with the budget process?
Yep, so it's great. So we plan IBP, it runs for a 3-year, 36-month cycle. We do what we call strategic financial planning all the time. So we have a 3-year SFP horizon, and the IBP process backs into that horizon. And so commercially, we understand what the revenue targets are. Obviously, the year 2 and 3 are less accurate. We kind of have to do some assumptions on how we disaggregate that information, but that's how the process runs. The S&OP process for us runs at about a 12-month pace because we can react much faster within that period. So we don't need it completely aligned past the 12-month period. We have an idea because of IBP what 2 and 3 will look like anyway. And then our S&OE process runs in no more than a 90-day process.
Hey, Peter, question. Thank you for the presentation. How successful do you feel like your process would be running today without Kinaxis? And second, related to that, how did you convince the organization about the power of Kinaxis? Did you do pilots, for example, and to build that momentum? Thanks.
I laugh because those are also hard. That was very hard. So for the first question, you need something to orchestrate. So we had 5 systems when I came into the business as the lead for planning. And you could try with Excel. We were trying with Excel, and it was not working. It was clearly we were making a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of challenges. We tried to put everything into a database and extract it with Alteryx, and we just couldn't make it work. Not quickly. Although we were trying. We were modeling and trying to do scenario plans and things like that in Excel. For Kinaxis or anything, Blue Yonder, or the old Manugistics, so Blue Yonder or SAP IBP, they're all great, and we looked at all of them as well. I tried in 2017 to get a planning system for the segment, and there was no desire to do so. So we redid the business case in 2019, right before COVID, and there was no desire to do so. And it kind of took us to break down a little bit when we finally said, I used the example of the 2019 submission and what we could have been doing in 2021, 2022 when we really got into this process and said, look at what we could have had right now. You want me to run all these scenarios and I simply cannot do it, but we could have done it. And that's how I kind of had to start saying, this is how you should look at a planning system for the segment. So we were able to run a couple of pilots on multiple systems that we were looking at the time. And we were able to show that there would be value and some commitments. Now, I, as the head of supply chain planning, had to commit to some significant reductions in inventory working capital in order to get that going, and I was very, very nervous about it. But we were able to do it, and I believed in the 3 systems that we were looking at, or 4 systems that we were looking at the time. 09 was the 4th. And we were able to make it happen. It was hard. It's kind of my reputation for a lot of it. It was scary.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.